Wendy Alec's groundbreaking epic fantasy book series, The Chronicles of Brothers, has captured the imagination of readers across the world. The thrilling supernatural tale of the cataclysmic war in heaven between the archangels Michael, Gabriel, and Lucifer, and their subsequent battle for the race of men, began in the fall of Lucifer and Messiah, the First Judgment. Now, the long-awaited third installment, Son of Perdition, has finally arrived.
In the fall of Lucifer, the origin of evil was revealed. In Messiah, Lucifer was defeated. Now, in Son of Perdition, Lucifer's revenge begins. With over 250,000 copies in print, Wendy Alec's extraordinary, groundbreaking fantasy epic continues with Book 3 of the Chronicles of Brothers, Son of Perdition. It is London, 2021. The end of days has begun. The angelic portals are open. The four horsemen of the apocalypse ride the skies, and the Son of Perdition will come forth to rule. Son of Perdition. Get your copy right away. Available now at Amazon.com, Books A Million, Borders, Barnes & Noble, and all good bookstores nationwide. Follow the dramatic Chronicles of Brothers epic fantasy series by visiting the Chronicles Circle at www.chroniclesofbrothers.com and join the ever-growing Chronicles community on Facebook at facebook.chroniclesofbrothers.com.
Hey guys, how you doing? My name is Jennifer and here I am in London, and it's so exciting as we celebrate the third in the series of Wendy Alec's brand new book, Son of Perdition, which is on sale now nationwide. Yes!
I am such a fan of the books, of the first two.
Yeah.
And I couldn't wait to get the next one, and it is everything I thought it would be. Let's talk about the first two books, first of all, for some of the viewers that might not be familiar with them. The first book was really heavenly in a sense. I mean, it comes from that perspective, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. It was the fall. It was the fall, as the title says, the fall of Lucifer. So it was really the three brothers, the three archangels, Michael, Gabriel, and Lucifer, as it could have been maybe before, you know, sort of the evil reared its ugly head and Lucifer's degeneration happened, and then we just started to go into the consequences of it. You know, with Adam and Eve, with the fall, with the flood. You know, you know, all that kind of thing, yeah. So it was that taster of the degeneration, really, before time began.
And the second book, tell us a little bit about that one.
Well, in Messiah, I mean, obviously, when Lucifer fell and he was banished, and in Fall of Lucifer, I have him banished by Christos, you know, who is Jesus. But of course, Jesus hadn't been born then, so we, you know, rev up like 2,000 years. And really, Messiah, the First Judgment, that is what it is all about. And really, just to, you know, fast forward, Lucifer had a resounding defeat on Golgotha. And that really is where we finished, you know, the second book with him sort of as a Jesuit priest in 2021. And just saying the last words of the book were, "We avenge Golgotha."
And then we get to Son of Perdition, the third book.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now you've really brought in the human element. And there's a human story intertwined with the angelic story.
Yes. So it's with the three brothers, Adrian, Jason, and Nick. Jason is the media mogul. He's the eldest brother. Adrian is the ex-Prime Minister of Great Britain, 2 terms. And Nick is the archaeologist playboy. You know, Nick is dying of AIDS, so he's the baby brother.
Which of these brothers is your favorite?
I love writing about Nick, and you know, we had a lot of people read it and they love Nick, but I've got to tell you, I don't know why, but I love Jason. Jason actually is going to be the main character. And Jason, I can't tell you, I don't see movie scenes in my head when I write about Nick or Adrian or any of the other characters, but you know what, with Jason, it's like a young Indiana Jones. And, you know, Jason's brash. He has absolutely zero people skills. And, you know, he's divorced from Julia. And, you know, he drinks too much because after his daughter was crippled. And he's just an unrelenting driver. You know, a media mogul, a media tycoon, you know, rough rides over everyone.
There's so many things in this book that are far different than the other books.
Yeah.
I could tell that there must have been a lot of research that went on, because you talk about how things could actually come to pass, and it looked like a lot of that was factual.
It pivots around as a backdrop for the plot about the Illuminati and about the premise that is there a shadow government, okay, which we might call globalists or the elites, and are they pulling the strings of not only the US government, but all governments in the world? And what I've done in this book, I've made Lorcan de Malay, okay, who, the one thing I will give away, who is Lucifer, who is, as a Jesuit priest in 2001, and that he is using the fallen, okay, because of his, after Golgotha, he doesn't have direct access, he has to use men. So he's using, you know, what he calls his dark slaves of the fallen to create a new world order, which will be under his dominion. But he's creating the new world order, and they've orchestrated it, planned it for years, because of his son, his only begotten son, who he is raising up now, who is going to head it up. So that is the basic premise of it. So obviously, Mark, there was so much research that had to be done. I researched the Illuminati, the Bilderberg Group, Bank for International Settlements, drug running in the CIA, petrodollars, 9/11, put options, Vigilant Guardian Program, North American Union, NAFTA, JFK's assassination. I think people, when they read it, will understand why it's in there. And, you know, the Federal Reserve, bioterrorism, martial law, mandatory vaccinations, FEMA, are there going to be concentration camps? Black helicopters might come in the next book, you know. And so I have researched all that and incorporated what I believe was important to be incorporated in Son of Perdition.
What is Son of Perdition? Fact or fiction?
Son of Perdition is fiction, is the skeleton of fact.
Another factor that I want to ask you about is the angels.
Yes.
Both the fallen angels and the heavenly angels are walking with men in this book. Do you think that happens?
Absolutely, I do. But the thing is, we've never seen, in the first two books, we didn't see the mix, really. And that's, I think, what's so exciting. Now in Son of Perdition, and I can't give any of it away because it's revealed who is who. There are some really strong characters that we, you know, I think we will feel, the readers will feel that they are humans, and actually they are angelic figures that are already loved and known in heaven.
Well, this is probably not the right question to ask right now, but as you've just finished this book, but when will we see the next book, and how many books do you have in mind in this series?
Sure. Oh my gosh, we were talking about it last night. I'm being pushed to finish it. Oh my gosh, by December 2011, which means I'll have another year like I've had this year. But if I do manage to do that, I think that I want to take a break then. That will be December 2010. And the next thing I want to do, I have to write the screenplay so that we can start kicking in to the movies. Because without that, we can't, you know. So I have to do a first draft.
How many books do you see in this series altogether? How many books can we expect?
Definitely 7. The number 4 is called A Pale Horse. I had to think of that. I mean, I had to put that in at the end of this book, so I had to know that. Number 5 will be The Fallen, called The Fallen. And then obviously we get to Armageddon, which is going to be amazing.
You mentioned something about the film, writing the screenplay.
Yes.
I notice when you write, this book feels very much like a novel, and yet there are filmic pieces of it. It's very visual.
Yeah.
You write that way, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Listen, I see movies in my head. I'm a movie girl. I'm a media girl. I don't think about writing a novel. For me, it's a film. It's filmic, always. And for me, it's always, after I finish, it's cut. I write as I see on a big screen. And I think the wonderful thing I love, especially with the young people who love and read the book and who write, you know, and so many of them do, they just say it's just amazing. Some of them write and it's amazing. They say, I've never been able to read a book through before, but I just read this like in 2 days and I just see it like on a screen. And that's my great hope, is that everyone has their own individual screen, movie screen in their head. And that excites me so much, is that while they're reading the book, they're creating their own movie in their head. I love that. I absolutely love it.
Nick had been driving for nearly an hour. He knew his life was in danger. 2 sets of car headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. Frantically, he punched in Jason's mobile number again. He waited. This is Jason DeVere. Come on, pick it up, Jason. I can't take your call right now. Nick looked in the rearview mirror. The 2 sets of headlights were closing in on him. A black helicopter flew overhead. The exchange at the monastery was ringing through. Nicholas, it's Lawrence. Hello, my boy. Lawrence, I'm in trouble. Nick broke off in mid-sentence. His head felt as if it was exploding into a million shards. His heart pounded violently like a jackhammer in his chest. He tried to put the car in a lower gear, but the entire left side of his body felt strangely paralyzed. Seeing Jotapa's cross, he grasped it with trembling fingers, then let go of the steering wheel as an agonizing pain struck his eyes. He was blinded by the intense searing light that all at once filled the car. He could hear Lawrence's voice dimly in the background reciting the Lord's Prayer. Nick closed his eyes. He knew he was dying. Yet he felt strangely calm. Thy kingdom come. Just one more glimpse of that glorious face. He smiled faintly as the red sports car crashed through the steel barrier. Thy will be done. Just one more glimpse. He smiled as the sports car plunged down the sheer embankment. Down. Forgive us our trespasses. He and Lawrence were speaking in unison. Down, down towards the raging black torrent. Deliver us from evil. Down towards the jagged rocks. Just one more glimpse. Down towards utter darkness. Nick reached out his right hand towards Christos. For thine is the kingdom. And then there was no more light.
In the fall of Lucifer, the origin of evil was revealed. In Messiah, Lucifer was defeated. Now, in Son of Perdition, Lucifer's revenge begins. With over 250,000 copies in print, Wendy Alec's extraordinary, groundbreaking fantasy epic continues with Book 3 of the Chronicles of Brothers, Son of Perdition. It is London, 2021. The end of days has begun. The angelic portals are open. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse ride the skies, and the Son of Perdition will come forth to rule. Son of Perdition. Get your copy right away. Available now at Amazon.com, Books A Million, Borders, Barnes & Noble, and all good bookstores nationwide. Follow the dramatic Chronicles of Brothers epic fantasy series by visiting the Chronicles Circle at www.chroniclesofbrothers.com and join the ever-growing Chronicles community on Facebook at facebook.chroniclesofbrothers.com.
Tell me about the DeVere brothers. Were they based on real people? Are they based on media characters?
Now, the family, I have based on more research into, how can I say, not the Illuminati as much, but the shadow government more, to have a huge family of trillionaires who may be financing both sides of wars and, you know, things like that. That comes from a lot of research from, you know, 17th century, 18th, 19th, up till today. So the basic family being trillionaires and what their family stands for, as you see in the scene when Lawrence and Cartier and Nick get together, and it's revealed to Nick what his family's involved in, which is totally shocking to him, is that. But Nick, I just, you know, he's who he is. He's an archaeologist, playboy, but he's a softie. You know what I mean? We love Nick. I love Nick. I mean, Nick's just made a lot of mistakes. You know, he had the accident with Lily, never forgave himself. Jason was terrible. Jason's so stubborn, okay? But Nick's not. Nick's more an artist. Nick was more the artist of the three brothers, and therefore he had more chord of sensitivity, and therefore he was more easily drawn, you know, into the hedonistic lifestyle. So he drowned his sorrows in heroin and cocaine. You know, he had enough money at the time from his trust fund to go, you know, all the clubs. Then we have Adrian. And Adrian has, you know, always had a great sense of humor when he was, you know, young. He's as you see him as European president, I mean, he just has this mesmeric, compelling ability, which Jason, his elder brother, notes, you know, because Jason's in the media, that he's never seen anyone ever like him who has that ability, you know, on camera to be able to instantly connect. So he's everybody's father, son, brother, you know, everywhere, internationally in the world. So Adrian's very compelling, urbane, very beautiful, okay, and sophisticated, but also has a human aspect which attracts people to him, which is quite interesting later as the story is revealed. And Jason, I like writing Jason. Jason is so stubborn. I mean, he's a totally work-driven entrepreneur, media tycoon, no people skills, totally stubborn, inflexible, refuses to forgive his younger brother. Okay, and when they were little, I had a little scene when they were little, when, you know, Jason was 17 and Nick was only about 5, and it was brothers forever, you know, forever pal, Jason said, and now he's so stubborn, he hasn't spoken to Nick for like about, what, 9 years. I mean, that's what he's like, you know. So he's, you know, and stubborn with Julia as well. Now, he's not seeing their divorce, that's finished as well. But he's really, really, he doesn't think he's lonely, but he lives a totally insular life. All he has is work and his hedge funds and his Vox Entertainment, and that's it.
A two-part question.
Yeah.
Have you started writing book 4?
Yeah.
And if you have, can I get a couple of chapters right away?
Yes, I started writing. I know exactly what happens. You know, Jason starts, he has to go to Dublin Airport, west of Ireland, meet certain people there. You know, he's only got one part of the picture, doesn't know about the Illuminati part yet on the other side. And it's very, very exciting.
Nick stared in fascination through the camera lens. The priest swept a carved horn bow with long, passionate strokes over the strings of a violin. The sound of the single violin echoed on the ocean winds, haunting, exquisite, poignant, almost lonely. He watched, mesmerized, as the priest's long, slim fingers moved deftly across the fingerboard. It was as though the music drew his soul. It was mesmerizing, hypnotic. Then abruptly, the priest stopped playing and turned slightly. Nick stared transfixed. The man was somehow strangely but indefinably familiar. He turned as though sensing something, someone. Nick stood frozen. He knew he was now directly in the priest's line of sight. Suddenly, Desmoulins dropped the violin. Then he stared up at Nick, his features turning from utter torment to ferocious rage. It was the priest from St. Cartier's photograph. Nick slammed the window shut, his breathing shallow, his mind racing. For the first time in his entire life, Nick sensed an overshadowing evil. The robes are behind the suits. The old man's words rang unmistakably in his ears. Some legends have it, he was the devil incarnate. There was no doubting it. There, on the terrace of the West Wing, less than 50 feet away, stood Lorcan Desmoulins.
Wendy, this book has so many, there's the novel aspect, the story aspect, but there's so much information and so much history. It makes me wonder, are we going to be able to go to your website and get more information?
Yes, yes. I'm trying already just to put a little library together, you know, for all our readers. And And I've started to put a little bit down of the fact behind the fiction, you know. And what I do, I had to have a figure who could do this, that Jason could spurn, you know, say, oh, for goodness sake, I'm the media, you know. So I used Alex, who's a new character, Alex Lane Fox. And it might be shocking, I know, for some people, you know, right in the beginning of the book with 9/11, I used 9/11, okay? And I really felt under God I could. And so Alex's mother was killed in 9/11, which made him want to be an investigative journalist. So when we meet him, Alex is 20, he's just trained at The Guardian, he's going to go to the New York Times. And Alex is the one who asks all the provocative questions which drive Jason completely mad, because Jason is mainstream media. Totally mainstream media, very influential mainstream media. And Alex is looking under the covers of the mainstream media, you know, so I enjoyed writing that, where they have their little bashing of heads. But seriously though, I have had Alex deal with the JFK assassination, okay? Very, very interesting things there, you know, with the Warren Commission, with the Vietnam, with oil reserves, and they wouldn't allow a central bank for the elite, for a shadow government, okay, things like that. And with the Federal Reserve. So we look into the Federal Reserve, but even right at the end, Alex brings up things like for the one world government, okay, and the mark of the beast, and the chip, mandatory vaccination. That's a good way to do it, you know. We have you refuse mandatory vaccination. What happens? You get put into a FEMA concentration camp because you're now quarantined, okay? You know, and then now you have to take a chip, and if you don't obey, what happens to you then? Obviously, it's not like today. I believe today is a shadow of, you know, we speak about 2012. I think we have longer to go, much longer to go. But by 2021, you know, I think we'll see things getting far more intense then. And I think everything that we are seeing today, that's happening right now in governments right around the world, I believe that it's a shadow, that the shadows are starting now, and that we're being prepped. I believe we're being prepped for the big things that are going to come, for the big takeover. So today, I believe, we stand on the outskirts of it all, and we're seeing all the shadow mechanics being laid as a foundation for the things that are to come.
The wonderful thing about these books, all of them, and especially Son of Perdition, everything you put in there, although it may be fiction, it's all possible, isn't it?
Yeah, much of it, it's all possible, it is. It is.
Wendy, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm more of a fan than an interviewer because I love the books. I love them all. In fact, I hope everybody will get a chance to run out immediately and pick up Son of Perdition. You won't want to put it down. It's an incredible book.
In the fall of Lucifer, the origin of evil was revealed. In Messiah, Lucifer was defeated. Now, in Son of Perdition, Lucifer's revenge begins. With over 250,000 copies in print, Wendy Alec's extraordinary, groundbreaking fantasy epic continues with Book 3 of the Chronicles of Brothers, Son of Perdition. It is London, 2021. The end of days has begun. The angelic portals are open. The four horsemen of the apocalypse ride the skies, and the Son of Perdition will come forth to rule. Son of Perdition. Get your copy right away. Available now at Amazon.com, Books A Million, Borders, Barnes & Noble, and all good bookstores nationwide. Follow the dramatic Chronicles of Brothers epic fantasy series by visiting the Chronicles Circle at www.chroniclesofbrothers.com and join the ever-growing Chronicles community on Facebook at facebook.chroniclesofbrothers.com.